Hi everyone, welcome back to Crypto Crayfish. Excited to have you here today. We are going to be talking about a whole bunch of different questions regarding alt season. Here we've got a wonderful little meme I've created where Santa says, "'Tis the season!" And elves say, "Alt season?" And we are definitely the elves, aren't we? Always looking for alt season. For those of you who are maybe a little newer to the space, I'll just do a quick definition. Everyone else, you're going to want to stick around for some of the info in this video. It'll really help kind of set the stage for December and next year. And we'll really look at the pros and cons for, are we in alt season or are we not yet? And what is the likelihood of each scenario? And that'll hopefully help you choose how to allocate capital and that type of thing in the future. Not financial advice, but of course, I'll talk about what I'm doing as well in light of those different things. So for those newer to the channel and to the cryptoverse, alt season stands for altcoin season. And an altcoin is basically any coin that is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the leader. It's not an altcoin, but every other coin technically is an altcoin. Ethereum is a little bit of an in-between just because it's been around long enough that it's not quite a full altcoin in a lot of ways. A lot of the, I guess, newer, more classic altcoins are much smaller market cap and can yield really, really high returns, like 100x in a cycle, but also can blow up and be a scam type of thing. So, but alt season in general refers to when altcoins outperform Bitcoin. It's not just when they're going up, they have to be outperforming Bitcoin, and therefore Bitcoin dominance has to be going down, and for a sustained and strong period of time. So that gives you a little definition of alt season or altcoin season, and that's what we'll be talking about in this video. Yeah, super important kind of area that we're just entering into for the post-halving year, right? The halving was this year, which is when the Bitcoin mining yield goes down by half every 4 years. And then the post-halving year is usually when you get the big blow off top in every 4-year cycle. So alt season is usually kind of the last thing to happen as Bitcoin enters euphoria. Then all the retail traders come back, retail traders being hedge funds, not the people who are actually paid to invest, just investing their own money, and they like to buy altcoins to get higher returns. And that's kind of what you see as alt season, usually in that post-halving year, which is 2025. All right, so let's talk first about the evidence for altcoin season starting right now. Okay, we're going to do a compare-contrast. We'll give the evidence that suggests altcoin season is now, and we'll give the evidence that suggests it could be a little bit down the line. I think it's nice to have a little bit of caution and a little bit of awareness at what the evidence is for both directions, maybe what the likelihood is, and then you can choose what to do with your money from there. So first big point, ETH BTC closes above the 50-day SMA. So what does that mean? Let me show you. We're going to go over here. Here's our ETH BTC chart, and I'm going to shrink this so you can see better. And hopefully you can see. So this is the last month, right? Back here is the beginning of November, and now we're in the beginning of December. You can see we had this huge spike that we talked about kind of right as I was starting the channel. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch my Ethereum loading the boat video. It'll talk about this. But this spike was really, really strong, right? It went to, 0.042. And then we still ended coming back down to below 0.32. And really, it was a pretty big fake out. A lot of people were like, oh, altcoin season's here. Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin. And then really, it just ended up being a fake out. You can see now we've had another pretty strong move, and it kind of feels like there's no rhyme or reason, right? Like you can draw some lines on this chart. I'll draw one for you guys just so so you kind of have it in mind. But overall, I think it doesn't feel, in general, ETH BTC can do some pretty surprising things. So it is on this line of support, right? And that has been rising. And so that's helpful to take notice of. You could kind of create a parallel channel as well if you want to. But arguably, this is just going to show you what it's already done, not necessarily what it's going to do. And I think that's what's really important. So I want to show you something that's really important, which is the 50-day SMA, 50-day moving average. It essentially looks at the price of Bitcoin over the last 50 days and does mathematical calculations with it to create a line that's called a simple moving average. So let me put it on the chart here. It's this purple line, okay? And traditionally, in past cycles, when Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has gotten a close above this 50-day SMA, that has marked the bottom being in for ETH BTC, for the cycle, okay? And we're talking about a weekly close, not just a daily close. So you'll see when we put this line on the chart, it doesn't quite feel as random, you know? We almost hit it here kind of as resistance. We had a little bit of a pullback. We broke through it, and then we came back almost exactly to it and held it as support. That's pretty bullish, right? That shows that ETH BTC is really doing well, holding above that line, and it's ideally flipped it from resistance, something that's blocking the price, to support, something that's supporting the price. And so that's pretty interesting to see, and that could be a strong sign of altcoin season starting, right? If ETH BTC has actually bottomed for the cycle, if this was the low of the cycle, then that means that Ethereum, which is the second largest market cap and the largest market cap altcoin, is starting to run against Bitcoin, which traditionally that would be the beginning of alt season, right? You start to see those bigger, less risky coins run first for alt season, and then those more and more risky coins are going to continually outperform more and more as more froth and retail traders enter the market. Okay, I do want to point out, so we're talking about weekly closes, right? And we just had our weekly close above this. So let's go to a weekly chart. I'm going to zoom this in for you guys. So you can see the purple line's still on here, but now these are weekly candles, which is key because really we don't care about daily closes. Something I will point out, you can see how this trend line has really marked pretty clear resistance in the past year, right? So you can see, like, once we broke below it, we've gotten, this is back in the summer. Really, we broke below it fully in July. And since then, we've kind of retested it on Wix and then stayed below it. And you can see a really great example here. In mid-October, we had a nice move, and we got right up to it. And then rather than putting in the close above it, we just shelled off again. Almost like the 50-day SMA and just pushing this ETH BTC ratio down. That's pretty common to see. And in past cycles, whenever you've gotten a weekly close above this 50-day SMA, the bottom has been in for ETH BTC. That changed this cycle. And like we like to say on here, sometimes small things are different in cycles, but in general, they rhyme. And so this is something that I want to be aware of, is that, this is different. And therefore, maybe we can't fully place as much weight on it now that it's happening here. So this was back in the first week of November. We talked about it, and we got this strong weekly move by ETH BTC, and we closed above the weekly trend line. And that's that should have meant the bottom is in based on past cycles. Instead, we began the next week, Monday, Tuesday, and just absolutely capitulated. We had a huge move straight to the downside as kind of a clear rejection. There wasn't follow through of this breakout of ETH BTC above the 50-day SMA. So for me, I'm trying to look for maybe now 2 weekly closes above the 50-day SMA, or at least kind of strong follow through here to prove that it's not just a fake out like we got back here, because it theoretically could be. And I think we'll know that in the next few days, really. Like, if you see this weekly candle start, moving higher, we're starting to get towards the 04s, I think the bottom is likely in. I think that means this was probably the bottom for ETH-BTC. But if you see some strong negative price action, especially if we go back below this 50-day SMA, I think you're gonna be looking at lower lows, or at least like more of a double bottom down here. And that's something that's really important to watch, because right now this weekly close is bullish. It's saying, yep, alt season is likely starting now. ETH-BTC is likely bottomed. But if it's a fake out, then you may want to remain cautious for a little bit longer on altcoins, because it could be really sending us a signal for the rest of the altcoin market. So I think that's what we want to look at. You can see in the past day, we've had a decently strong, let me go to a 5 day, it's probably easier. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a spotty chart, but you can see, today is December 1st. We've had a decent little pullback from, kind of our close time a few hours ago. And it really hasn't picked a direction yet, though. So I think I'm watching this, but for now, it's bullish. For now, that's why it's in the camp of, being evidence for altcoin season, because it did just get the weekly close above that 50-day SMA, and that's a big deal. Once ETH-BTC is bottomed, usually altcoin season is beginning. Next evidence for altcoin season, M2 money supply. So this is an important one. We've talked about it before. Generally, when money supply, meaning how easy money is to get around the world, how much money is kind of printed and in circulation, when that is increasing, there's extra liquidity to be going to cryptos. And usually they move very in correlation between Bitcoin and the money supply. And so that's why it's important to look at. So here, let's go to the US money supply. It needs to be on a large scale time frame because it doesn't do it for short scale. And I'm going to just zoom in here because we don't need to go all the way back to the 90s. And you can see I'm going to switch to logarithmic. Okay. So hopefully this is giving you an idea. We're obviously dealing with much larger numbers than maybe we normally would be. We can hide these. This chart doesn't seem to be working. I'm going to reload it. In the meantime, let me show you global liquidity. So here's a good chart. This goes back to, November 2023. You can see this kind of slow increase in M2 money supply for the globe. And we've reached about 94 trillion now. And then you can kind of see a pretty matching increase with the Bitcoin price. Obviously, there's ups and downs. There's things that are different, but I think that's important to kind of look at. This isn't the most updated. It doesn't go all the way to current. In general, it's kind of hard to find info on the money supply that is super accurate and current. But in general, you're starting to see kind of it curl up, right? So here we go. This is much better from the chart here. And you can see we're getting a pretty strong move in the US money supply now, as even though the Fed is still in quantitative tightening, and I have looked into figuring out when quantitative easing is going to come. We'll talk about that. But even though we're still in quantitative tightening, you can see that the money supply is curling up again. We really hit our low back in late 2023, and we've been curling up ever since. And that's really important because, again, that's going to push Bitcoin and cryptos higher. And that's happening because our debt is becoming so big. So we are creating so much money through our debt that even the Fed tightening its balance sheet isn't removing liquidity from the market for the U.S. money supply. And so that's just important to keep in mind. I think that's a pro in the column of altcoin season. I think M2 money supply is on the rise, and it has been for a while. That's going to create liquidity to go in the direction of alts, and especially once quantitative easing comes back. All right, Bitcoin dominance recent downtrend. This is huge because this is literally part of the definition of Altseason, right? Is a sustained, that's the key word, sustained downtrend in Bitcoin dominance. Let me show you what I mean, okay? Because you will see people on Twitter, people all over the place yelling at you that it's altcoin season when we get this drop. Look at the size of this drop compared to, let me get you a little measure, right? We've dropped from the high, we're down almost 8% on Bitcoin dominance. This was the last altcoin season. It was a of course this chart is in the way. There you go. 46% drop. So this is not altcoin season, right? This is what we're looking for. A sustained, really strong, almost directly straight down move in dominance. That's what creates altcoin season, as they take that liquidity from Bitcoin. Okay, it doesn't mean Bitcoin goes down, but it means altcoins go up much faster. So now let's go back to the current cycle. Give you an idea. I'm going to hide these moving averages. And you can see, we've had a strong move lower, but it's not fully convincing yet. And what I mean by that is just that, frankly, I need to see more evidence that we have completely broken through this line of support on the Bitcoin dominance. And I think, we're getting this move now. But if you look at the weekly chart, right, which we love to do, you can see it's pretty, let me zoom out a little bit, right? If you take this trend line out, this is what support we've been holding, and you can see our weekly close was basically exactly at support. To me, that means it hasn't fully given up yet. I think, it can choose either direction. We could get a bounce or it can break down from here. And I think if it starts to break down, again, another sign, another strong indicator of altcoin season beginning. But I don't think we're quite there yet on the dominance chart. So be watching this. This will be a great signal. Since the close, we've actually had a pretty strong little move below it. So it'll be interesting to see if we can reclaim it before the end of next week. I think by the end of next week, we'll really know about ETH BTC and the dominance chart, and that'll really help us to designate our timing. And you'll see it over the course of this week. Like, if Bitcoin dominance is going to bounce, it needs to do it soon. Otherwise, I think it's in the pro column for altcoin season now. We're a decent ways off the high here, 8% down. It's pretty strong. We haven't had a move like that since, back in October 2023. So I think it's an important thing to take note of. All right, our last point for altcoin season being now, Ethereum's starting to keep pace with BTC. So let me go over here. This is just a little chart I made on the performance of different vehicles over the last month. I do this because I'm obviously a big ETH holder, and I want to make sure that ETH is accurately doubling ETH USD every month. I want to make sure that the vehicle I'm holding is not eroding and I'm not losing percentage by percentage, because it is, it is technically taking on slightly more risk than if I was going to hold like FETH, which is a direct one-to-one relationship. So anyway, that's why I track this. You can see it's doing quite well this last month, 87%. Whew. And you can see here, though, Bitcoin, 41.5% in November, ETH, 42.5%. So you can see ETH is tracking Bitcoin almost exactly, which is great to see. That's something that we haven't seen for a long time. ETH BTC has been going down, which of course means ETH has been underperforming Bitcoin for the last multiple years. And so to see those start to be in line suggests that really altcoins are starting to get more of a buy, Ethereum being one of the first ones. And that's important. That starts to signal to me that altcoin season could be here. All right, now let's talk on the other side of the coin. Let's talk about the against points for alt season now. This is kind of those cautions that maybe you're not going to see in other YouTubers. My goal is to really help you succeed here and offer cautions in the market because I've seen it destroy people before. It's not like these cautionary things have to happen, but I think so many people will just bull post that altcoin season is here until their eyes bleed, and I'm not here to do that. I'm here to kind of give a balanced view. So the first is seasonality of stocks this week and crypto. So that is something. So stocks this week actually have a track record of the week post Thanksgiving. The stock market is only positive 1/3 of the time, which is pretty interesting. So doesn't mean it can't be positive, but it likely means that 2 out of 3 times, the greater likelihood is that the stock market is going to be negative this week. And that could pull a little bit on crypto. Crypto is pretty correlated to the stock market these days, and I think that's important to keep in mind. As far as seasonality of crypto, what I'm talking about there is that usually Bitcoin dominance runs pretty hard into, you usually get kind of a nice final spike into December of the halving year. So let me give an example of that. Let's look at last cycle here. Okay. So we were kind of in this sustained uptrend. You can see we got this nice peak in September. You can see we sold off. Sorry, this is what we want to be looking at. So this was, so we're looking 4 years ago, right? So we're looking at December 2020 is what we're talking about, because now we're in December 2024. And so you can see, from the bear market, we had a strong move. They got a pullback. Then starting in kind of really September, they got one final move in the dominance. It was really, really strong and actually put in a new high on December 28th, 2020. And that's something that you've seen in multiple cycles, is that big blow off top in dominance in December. And oftentimes a pullback in dominance in November, right? You can see this pretty strong pullback here. This may not look like a lot when we're this zoomed out, but this, from this high to this low, was 9.5%, right? Way bigger than the drop we just got in dominance. So I just think that's important to point out is, traditionally crypto has this final move of dominance in December of the halving year to really finish shaking out the altcoin market before it starts to engage alt season. And I think you could see that again. I think I would not be shocked if we get a huge bounce here, go to a double top or another high in dominance as one kind of flush of the altcoin market. And frankly, I think it would be good for the market to see that. All right, other evidence against altcoin season now. The US dollar index not seeing a sustained breakdown yet. So a lot of people are pointing to the DXY chart, which let's go talk about it. This is the value of the US currency, okay? And when we look at it, a lot of people have been talking about I've been talking about on this channel, 107 is a key level, right? It's something we've been kind of butting against since October 2023, April, up towards in July. We didn't get there. And so I think if we break out above that, you could see some risk off sentiment for a while, and it could kind of spook the stock market. We kind of got to look at it, but we have had this short-term rejection, and you've seen a lot of people being like, okay, DXY is rolling over. It's time for alt season. Let me show you what the DXY has to do for alt season to happen. This is the example from last cycle, right? We're looking again at 2020, and we know that, hold on, let me zoom out a little bit. All right, our last cycles were 2021. We got a really nice move into a blow off top. You can see here the DXY went down 13%, right? That's what led to alt season. Another example, let's go back to 4 years before that, 2017. You can see right around that time we got this move in the dollar. That's another almost 15% drop in DXY. Okay, so traditionally, it's not always perfectly lined up. Like when the dollar goes down, altcoin season starts, but in general, you're seeing the dollar capitulate through altcoin season and through a blow off top. And here, we're just not there yet. I think we could be starting it, but it's way too early to tell. A 15% move down from here would be all the way to almost a 91 on the dollar. That's a big move down, guys. And so we're just not there yet. And frankly, I'm not convinced it's a rejection yet. I think it could be, but I also think we could just be gearing up for another retest of 107. I think it's super common to kind of like Bitcoin's doing right now, hit a resistance level, get some consolidation below it, and then go for it again. And you can see actually this evening, we've had a strong start to the week for the dollar. It's up 0.5%. And so maybe this week we kind of see a run back to 107, and then it makes a decision. But maybe that run back to 107 kind of spooks the stock market like we've been expecting in this week because of seasonality. Just things that could line up. All right, now let's talk of lack of QE and further interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. This is evidence against alt season because quantitative easing is really important, as we talked about with the money supply, in order to really fuel that kind of euphoria of people having extra money to send into altcoins, especially retail traders. And that's really important to mention because the Fed is not talking about QE. I've looked at a bunch of different articles. There's not even really betting markets on QE. One of my subscribers, Bob, asked that. Thanks for asking that. And there's really not betting markets on it, largely because not very many people care too much. They kind of think of it as an afterthought, but it is really important to crypto. And so I think you should care about it. My guess is we don't see it till next year. And that goes along with rate cuts, which I can show you have kind of, people are a little bit less bullish on rate cuts, should I say. They see the economy holding up really well in the US, and they know that the Fed may not be in as much of a rush to cut rates. So we were originally pricing in, 4, 5, 6 rate cuts next year. Now we're down to 2 or 3. And this December one, used to be an 85% chance, and now it's down to, for a while it was more of a 50-50. Now it's down to more of like a, let's see. We're at a 63.5 to a 36.5. And I actually think I kind of think the Fed might hold rates in December, which could spook the altcoin market for a little bit. They generally don't like tighter financial conditions. So it's just something, I don't think it's necessarily going to change the tide, but I do think it could change the exact timing of when it starts. And that's all this is. It's not saying altcoin season is not coming. It's just saying this is the evidence against it being right now. The last thing I'm going to talk about on the against side is not enough retail trader interest. It might feel like everyone is talking about Bitcoin and all these things, but if you zoom out and get out of kind of the crypto headspace, which a lot of us are in, there are a ton of people who it's not even on their radar yet, right? And I can prove that to you with some of this social media data. It's pretty interesting. This is something that I think is really valuable. You can look at various social interest metrics that are super helpful for kind of telling how tuned in the average retail investor is and retail traders, and looking compared to last cycles. So for example, you can see from January 2024, we're kind of in the same boat. We've just kind of been, going sideways almost. We maybe have a little more interest, but overall it's pretty similar. And that shows you, there was this one spike back in July, but overall pretty similar levels the whole year. And that's pretty crazy considering we started the year at 49K and now we're at almost 100. So we've doubled, and yet retail traders aren't necessarily back. And retail traders are especially important, not for Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin has gone up a ton without it, but for altcoins. So that's what we need for alt season. And let me zoom out for you so you can see in a last cycle, right? Look at this sustained move with really strong volumes compared to where it was at before, right? So you kind of see this lower level consolidation for the few years before of social interest, and then look at this. That's that blow off top that you get in post-halving years. And here, we're at higher levels because crypto adoption is just increasing. There's more people in the cycle in the space every cycle. But overall, it's kind of at that same consolidation level it's been at for a few years. We haven't seen that big sustained move to the upside yet. So that's kind of the last point I wanted to talk about, where altcoin season doesn't start in earnest until you have all that retail interest coming back. And I really don't think that happens till Bitcoin at least hits 100K. And that maybe starts to spark it. But I don't quite feel like we're there yet. So I am not necessarily... Let's talk about kind of the summary slide here. Because I think we've gone through a lot of different info. I think it's all interesting. You've seen evidence on the pro side, and you've seen evidence on the against side for altcoin season really starting now. For me, this is the summary of outcomes likely in my mind. And I've just kind of put some percentages that I think is the likelihood for how I'm thinking about things right now. And I'll talk about what that means for my investments. So altcoin season begins now. To me, that's 55%. And that's not necessarily like we're going to rocket immediately to the top. Like, I think it's going to take time for retail interest to come back, for dominance to really prove its breakdown, for the DXY to really prove its breakdown, for ETH BTC to show that it's sustained above this 50-day SMA. But I think this could be the beginning of that. I think there's enough evidence in the pro column. You're starting to really see some of those tides turn. And for me, what it means with my money is I just want to make sure that I'm allocating consistently a solid amount of capital to my big player of Ethereum so that if altcoin season is beginning now, I'm not going to miss it. Because, thinking about, it's definitely possible we get one final capitulation, but if I wait and hold all my chips back for that one eventuality, that's how you miss the move, and that's what I'm really trying to avoid. So I'm dollar cost averaging in, kind of viewing it like that. The next most likely outcome, which I think there's still a strong chance, 35%, is altcoins receive one final capitulation against Bitcoin in December. We talked about that seasonality in past season cycles, where December is really that final capitulation. Maybe Bitcoin dominance gets one more bounce. Maybe the DXY doesn't quite roll over yet. And maybe we just see December be like one more kind of sell-off in ETH BTC that I would take huge advantage of. I would actually love to see that. That would be my favorite outcome. But of course, I have to be prepared for all of them. The last one is altcoins bleed against Bitcoin longer than December. And I put this at 10%. I do think it's possible. You know, we haven't seen quantitative easing come back. There could be regulations. The stock market is heavily overvalued, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's ready for a pullback, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that it would be surprising if we got one. So I think that's just something to be aware of. Again, I do think altcoin season will come. I don't think we're going to like miss it. I think at some point in 2025, we'll definitely be certain we're in alt season. I just think, you know, is it possible that they bleed against Bitcoin into January, into February? Like, yeah, I think there's a 10% chance of that. Most likely, though, I think altcoin season begins now. And that's where, you know, I think I'm putting my money where my mouth is. It's something I want to be really ready for. And I think at the end of the day, you're not going to look back on these prices and be like, oh, that was a bad time to buy in, even if we get one more capitulation. So as long as you're okay holding for the next year, not freaking out if we get another drop in December, I think for me, they're great buying prices. Doesn't have to be financial advice for you. Everyone's got their own decisions to make. But Ethereum has been doing really, really well for me, and I'm excited for it for the next year. You know, we're not even at all-time highs yet, and that's pretty amazing in comparison to Bitcoin, which is so far above a lot of its all-time highs from last cycle. So I'm excited for that catch-up to happen, and I think, you know, making 10 grand on Ethereum in a day last week was a wake-up call of, you know, this is a really big deal and could really change my financial future. And hopefully you've enjoyed this video and feel like this pro and con has really allowed you to view the market in a really balanced way and not be deterministic about where exactly it's going to go, and kind of hedge in all directions, if that makes sense. I don't think it makes sense to be all the way out. I don't think it makes sense to necessarily be all the way in yet, although I'm starting to get towards that point. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. I hope you all are enjoying the channel. I've been really enjoying comments that are genuine about how it's helped you or questions below. I will be planning on doing a video this week talking about how Trump administration will affect things. And yeah, I really appreciate the support. Comments, subscriptions, likes, you know, all that stuff means a lot to small channels growing. Feel free to share me with friends and that type of stuff. I would really appreciate it, and I appreciate anyone who's made it this far and watched to the end. All right, I will talk to you guys on the flip.